Welcome to the Culture of Things podcast with Brendan Rogers. This is a podcast where we talk all things culture, leadership and teamwork across business and sport. Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm Brendan Rogers, the host of the Culture of Things podcast. This is episode 4, part 2. This episode's the second half of my chat with Martin West. As a reminder, Martin is the owner of a consultancy business called XGAP, which is short for Execution Gap. XGAP focuses on helping leaders create conversations that produce healthy team performance. Martin has co-authored a recently released book called Hard Road, A Leader's Journey Begins. If you haven't already, I encourage you to go back and listen to episode 4, part 1, before listening to this episode. If you have already listened to part 1, let's dive into this episode as Martin shares the other 4 parts of the model from the book and some more lessons for emerging leaders. Look, mate, let's move on to the second part of the model, build strong relationships. So just give us a bit of a summary about what that's about and where that came from.
Okay, that is about having good, strong one-on-one relationships with people in your team. The origin of this is an observation that you can have goals right, you can have interaction or team health right within a team, but if it's not built on strong relationships that you as a leader personally have with individuals in your team, then it can be a house of cards and it can come down quite quickly. And our observation was that some leaders had not taken the time to spend one-on-one time with individuals in their teams, just to get to know them and to find out what their aspirations are and to ask just some simple questions about how they like to be managed. A lot of things in teams and work and organisations and business, I feel are baked in to a schedule, quarterly meetings, annual meetings, the weekly staff meeting. A lot of those things seem to be common language and baked in. But one of the things that's not baked in well, is the one-on-one. And just having a one-on-one for no other reason than to find out how the individual is that you're leading is going, what are their strengths, what are they struggling with, what do they like about your leadership, what motivates them, demotivates them, just some simple questions. So this second part of the model, build strong relationships, came from watching this part missing from what leaders do. And again, a short story. I ran a workshop with a client. It was only 4 people in the room and it was half a day. And I could tell at the end of the workshop that something was not quite right. And so I just went off script. I just asked a simple question. I asked everyone in the room to rate the quality of the relationship with everyone else in the room. We had the leader and we had 3 other team members. And I just said, rate it red, yellow, green, and go and put your answer up on the whiteboard. So each person went up to the whiteboard. They listed the other people's names underneath and wrote red, yellow, green. And lo and behold, 3 people out of this team of 4 were red, and they rated each other red. And so I'm looking at it, and I said, guys, I've just spent 4 hours together. You're telling me that of the 4 people in this room, 3 of you that have been working together for more than 5 years, you're rating your personal relationship with each other red. And they all nodded. And I said, should we try and fix that? And again, they all nodded. And then that led to a whole other conversation to find out why is it red. And it turned out the cause was actually quite straightforward. It was simple to understand. Not simple to fix, but simple to understand. But what killed me was I didn't uncover this till the end. And so this relationships topic is all about understanding the strength of the relationships that exist between you and the team members and within the team. Because if they're red or yellow, then almost doesn't matter what else you're trying to get done. It's not going to get done quickly.
Yeah, it really reminds me of, you mentioned Patrick Lencioni earlier as well, and the 5 dysfunctions and trust and conflict being the first 2, or the fear of conflict. So again, if those relationships aren't there and they're not strong, then how can people have the conversations they need to have to get the improvement and the results they need to have? It's just, to me, it's just not logic. It's not possible.
No, that's right. And it's not hard to fix as a leader. I think you just got to dedicate yourself to doing the one-on-one and asking maybe 2 or 3 very simple questions. One of them would be, what motivates you? What demotivates you? Another question would be, what do you like about my leadership style? And perhaps anything I can improve. And another third question I love to pose is, where do you see yourself in 3 years' time? I think if you can uncover those sorts of questions in a very informal way, it helps build the picture and builds the relationship.
Yes, mate. Look, great questions and great simplicity you're providing as well. Can I just ask for listeners, and particularly, you mentioned earlier how it's very, very difficult as a leader. We get dragged into so much stuff and day to day and the urgent rather than the important, and relationships certainly fits into that important category. If a leader's not doing this and having those one-on-ones, what's some simple advice you can give them just to build that habit? What would you say to them?
First, I'd say just think about the concept. Think about what do I think the strength of the relationship is with each person in my team individually. Just because before you do anything, you've got to value the topic. Do I place value on the strength of my relationships? You've got to be honest with yourself. And as a leader, if you're not mentally in a place where you value the strength of those relationships, then it really doesn't matter what I say next. And sometimes leaders are in seasons where they're new, they're just scrambling, they can't see time to add one-on-ones. So the first step would just be to ask yourself, do I value having strong one-on-one relationships with my team members? And maybe not progress any further with what I'm about to say next until you get to a point of deciding, yes, this is super important. Now I've got the brain space. My next piece of advice would be, try and find, if I went to the simplest, not worst case, but simplest frequency and tip, it would be find a time every 6 weeks to sit down one-on-one with each person in your team. Now, ideally, it should be more frequently than that, but if you want to go with the simplest advice, every 6 weeks, and it could be coffee with no agenda. Just want to sit down, diarise one-on-one each person in your team once every 6 weeks. If you just do that, you'll be making progress because you're investing time. And then if you need to formalise some sort of agenda, perhaps you can go to those questions I said earlier on. But just once every 6 weeks, one-on-one, 30 minutes, maybe 60 minutes, coffee, and get into the habit of doing that.
That's fantastic advice, mate. And I really like I like both points, but particularly that first point. It's, this is not a tick the box exercise. If you are not invested in it, if you don't believe that relationships are a key part of you being a great leader and getting the best out of your team, then don't just give it lip service. Don't do it.
No.
Because all your actions and behaviours after that will not support that you believe in it. They'll actually support that you don't believe in it.
No, and you'll cancel, and we see leaders do that. And cancelling one-on-ones is a shocker. Telegraphs such a poor message. You're much better off not scheduling them in the first place. And I get it. Sometimes leaders are overwhelmed. They go, Martin, I can't schedule one-on-ones. I've got to deal with this crisis, or I've got to go and impress my boss, or I've got to go and create some momentum myself personally. I get it. I'm not saying you have to do this from day one. But at some point, you have to face up to what value do I place on the relationships.
And that's it. I think it gets back to that old saying that what you value, or what you value, you'll prioritise and you'll put time to it.
That's right. Exactly. Much better waiting till you value it rather than pretending.
Absolutely.
Cancel.
Mate, let's move to the third part of the model, alignment and cultivating team alignment.
Okay, this part of the model for new leaders really is what our business was for the first 10 years. It's answering 4 questions as a team. I'll say what the 4 questions are, but I want to right up front say that the key here is getting buy-in. So the 4 questions we think teams need an answer to successfully produce results and improve their performance. Question 1, why do we exist? What's our purpose? Question 2, describe success. Describe some point in the future, normally 1, maybe 2 years, and get really clear on what success looks like for the team at that point. Question 3, what do we have to focus on in the next 6 months? The key here is not having a big list, three or 4 things, nothing more than that. If everything's important, nothing's important. So question 3 is, what do we need to focus on to help drive us towards that picture of success? And then the final question, the 4th one, is, what do I need to execute? If we know what question 1 is, the reason, our purpose, and then we know where we're heading, describing success, now we know what to focus on. The last piece of the jigsaw is really being clear personally, what do you need to focus on? What do you need to execute? And keeping that really simple. So they're the 4 questions, and it's really a workshop that we advocate the leader leads the team through to get buy-in.
Mate, what I really love about that, and again, the model I just really love, again, the simplicity of it, but probably for some of those leaders out there that are, thinking, well, relationships and self-awareness is all good, but we've got to get stuff done. And that really, to me, focuses in that alignment and the cultivating a team. This is where we get stuff done, but you get stuff done better when you've got the self-awareness and when you've built the relationships, because you'll work together better.
Exactly. And look, we have screwed this up as a company. The first 10 years, this is where we would have started the model at alignment. But after making the mistakes we've made and seeing that quality of relationships is absolutely critical, and the step prior to that, having some level of self-awareness is key, it's now not the first part of the model, but it is very key. It's definitely key. This is all about what is the game plan and how are we going to execute the game plan.
Mate, I have to ask, and something completely random has jumped into my head, but do all of your clients know that you've been treating them as guinea pigs for this last 20 years? All our best stuff comes from our clients. I tell them. I try to tell them. Look, isn't it the best? It's the best learning ground, isn't it? It's the best learning ground. Yeah, like we're definitely not saying we know everything. Clients teach us at least as much as we help them. There's no doubt about that, and we enjoy it. Especially, our close clients, the ones we have longer term relationships with. You can be more upfront, more frank, and really enjoy the journey. They know us warts and all, the stuff we're good at, the stuff we're not. Many of our close clients, for instance, realise that my business partner and I are better together. I had one client tell me that once, said, look, Westy, we love what you do, but you're better when Bragg is with you. I'm going, okay, thanks. And I knew it. I already knew that. And vice versa, they would say similar things to him. Well, so once you get good client relationships, they start being pretty honest with you, which is good. And on the topic, mate, I mean, the sum of the parts together is better than just the individual parts, right? So again, you and Mark make a great team.
Yeah.
I love what you said before about, you don't know everything, but I think the key message in this is, none of us knows everything, but you are really open to improvement, like a lot of the great leaders out there, and that's what distinguishes you from maybe the average versus to what you're achieving today.
Yeah, I can be a slow learner. Some of these lessons, the first big pivot we made in the business took 10 years. It's a long time to realise that team health and behaviours in a team are important.
Mate, dare I say it? You and Mark are just mere males like us, and maybe you need a little bit of female influence to help you move forward a little bit quicker. But let's not go into that area just now.
Yeah.
Mate, let's move on to the
female coach in the US.
Let's move on to the 4th part around discipline and establishing team discipline. Before you explain that, I get the feel and the sense, and I guess some of my experience says this is probably the tough part. Less so about maybe determining the behaviours around that and what the team disciplines are, but more the application and the constant accountability attached to that. How about you explain some more?
So the next discipline is the next lesson is out of the 5 is discipline, and it's really an accountability discipline. And the easiest way I can tee this up by saying, up till this point, all we've done is establish a plan, build great relationships, and gotten self-aware. We don't know what's actually happened. And so the team meeting is the cornerstone of the discipline that we're talking about here. There are several aspects of the discipline, but the weekly team meeting is the cornerstone. And the reason that's a cornerstone, because it's the game. It's the time where you get to see what happened, what didn't happen, what do we need to do differently next, and you get to see the behaviour from the team come to the surface. We've got a very specific way we think that team meeting should be run every week, but the overarching point is, unless you've got some way to track progress of the game, all you've got is a great plan. So this is really about execution, what got executed. And the discipline just means something that's repeated. For instance, if I was to ask you, Brendan, how often do you exercise?
About 3 times a week.
Okay, 3 times a week is a discipline. I haven't asked you what you do, how long you do it for. 3 times a week is a discipline. If you'd said 3 times a month, I'd go, not really a discipline. Maybe it's something that you dabble in every now and then. So discipline just means something that is repeated regularly. It doesn't mean it has to be great. It doesn't mean it has to be the same every time. It's the repetition that's the key. And we think the key part of that is the weekly team meeting.
I don't want to put words into your mouth, but I get the sense that understanding discipline, and in my opinion, there is a severe lack of discipline in, to be fair, the global society and people's behaviours. Is this the toughest part of the model for leaders to really grasp and to show the discipline needed?
Again, because I'm saying that the big point here is the weekly team meeting. There's a monthly meeting we think should happen, a quarterly meeting, but the weekly is the key. Most teams already do meetings. So it's not like meetings foreign. It's just most of them are not done well. 2/3 of the meeting is agendarized, it's static, there's no engagement, there may be a little bit of discussion, debate. What we try to do is flip that around. We limit the amount of preset agenda for a weekly team meeting and maximise the amount of what we call real-time agenda or discussion debate. And I find once a team gets a taste of a different way of doing the team meeting, then the discipline part of it, i.e. doing it each week, becomes a lot easier. So it's like trying the new way is part of the key. Most teams, I think, know that meetings is part of the culture. It's just their experience of them has been really bad. And so we try and show how you can have a really good experience of a team meeting. And once clients experience a new way of doing it, they get addicted to it, going, this is great. How do we ever do things differently than this way?
Yeah, once again, a great point. I mean, I'm not sure that there's a lot of leaders out there that are enjoying the meetings that they're having and to use your analogy about being at the game, the game they're playing. So anything that can be done to help them and understand how to have better meetings, it's surely everyone would have to be quite open to that.
Yeah, otherwise the plan you did in the previous lesson around alignment is just it's static. Whereas we know that teams and work is dynamic. Stuff changes every week, and the only way to stay on top of that is that team meeting. Otherwise, you've got a bit of paper that sits in the drawer and you're just hoping for the best, or you're really good at email. But neither of those is a substitute for a robust, dynamic, interesting, sometimes conflict-filled weekly team meeting.
Yeah, you just touched on something we haven't spoken about, and I guess we won't. We'll go into a little bit of that, but all of these bits are connected, and we'll talk about the connection of these. But let's share about the last part of the model around coaching.
Coaching's the reason we find that this is the last and most important part of the model is ultimately your job as a leader is about other people in the team. It's not about you, and it takes people sometimes a little time to realise that. It's not about me. It's about others. So you have to change your mindset. And ultimately, your role as a leader and the thing that will bring you most satisfaction is if you can see individuals in the team improve. And therefore the team collectively improve. If you can sit back and look at the team and think you've helped individuals and the team become better, and you can find the brain space to do that and a simple method for doing that, that is the most satisfying part of being a leader of a team. And we advocate a very simple approach to coaching, called the 3-box approach to coaching, which is, imagine in your mind a visual picture of one box. Let's say it's down in the bottom right corner of a whiteboard, and it's listed current performance. Right there is where you want to get clear with someone you're coaching what their current performance is, how are they current producing, performing, or delivering. The next box is upper left corner, arrow pointing to it, is future performance. That's a description in 2 or 3 dot points of where will we love to see you as an individual in the future. 2 or 3 dot points on performance, delivery, or behavior at some point in the future. And then the key box is the 3rd box, which is really where you need to help individuals understand you're in it with them, is the how. And the 3rd box is almost pointing halfway between the other 2 boxes. It's the how. It's really an agreement on what are the steps we're going to take in the next weeks and months to help you get from current to future. And that how box is really the coaching box. It's where, as a coach, you're working with the individual, getting clear on what is it that needs to happen, how does it need to happen, how can you help them, and make sure you're not scaring them with massive steps. It doesn't need to be big changes. But we think coaching is key. It's the juice behind being a team leader. You know, all the previous steps are important. You don't become a team leader just to get self-aware, or just to build strong relationships, or to get alignment, or discipline. Ultimately, you're in a leadership role, and I think the thing that brings most satisfaction, it does for me as a consultant, is helping individuals and teams improve. And so coaching is critical for that.
And I think it's, I'm pretty sure you and I would agree on this page, is that, look, if that's not your motive and you know why you've gone into or want to go into leadership positions, then you're probably doing it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And sometimes it, you know, especially new leaders, sometimes you're just trying to survive. And so when a new leader reads this book and they see coaching in there, they might think, oh man, how am I going to have time for that? Even if you don't have time for it, but you just absorb that ultimately I'm going to get most satisfaction, not out of getting promoted, but out of seeing people improve. Even if they can just absorb that point, that's going to be really helpful.
Mate, well, even the best players, or actually the best players, have coaches. That's why they're the best, right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
Mate, wrapping up the model. So I'm a new leader. I pick up the book. I spend the money on it. Fantastic. I have a read, and I'm going to spend the next 6 or 12 months on self-awareness because I think I need to. Is that how I should apply this, or can I move between the how linked, how interconnected are these things?
I would work on the first 2 really quickly. If I was looking at the model, I'd be trying to and I'm a new leader, I'd put a peg in the sand, a date where I'm trying to do step 3. That's the alignment part. And I'd put that peg maybe 3 months out. And if you weren't feeling confident, maybe 4 months, 5 months out. But you need to put a peg in the sand where you're going to have the team together and decide to work your way through the 4 questions under alignment, which is purpose, success, what are we going to focus on, what's each person going to execute. The time between now and then is where you work on those first 2, self-awareness and building strong relationships. If you'd asked me of all the things in the book, if I was just to do 2, if I was to walk away and just do 1 or 2, where would the starting point be? The 2 I would say start with do the self-awareness exercise, get some feedback from your team and maybe a peer and maybe a boss on your strengths and weaknesses. Just get that as honest as you can. And the second thing was start wrapping your head around how to do really good weekly team meetings. They'd be the 2 starting points. If you could get those 2 things into your rhythm, make a start on those two. That'd be the place to start.
That's fantastic, mate. Thanks for sharing that advice. And I think for me, and what I really want to get across as well is that you don't just tick one off and you're done with it. These things are living and breathing. It's live, and you should always be constantly working on each part.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I think they fall in. Some people are going to be naturally stronger at some things than others. There'll be some people who are listening to this that are great at the alignment part, but may need to do some work on their self-awareness and relationships. Others will be great at those two, but aren't so great at the alignment and weekly team discipline. So I think you've got to match your own situation and wiring and personality a bit to this. And each person should be able to work out, okay, I know I need to do some work here.
Mate, I've taken a lot of your time today, and I really appreciate you explaining the model in such detail, and that is just going to be so helpful for our listeners. There's so much gold to be taken from that. If we go into just wrapping this up, what's the impact that you and Mark are trying to have on leaders, and particularly emerging leaders, through this book? What are you trying to achieve?
Really, really simple, mate. Help them never become the limit to their team. We want every leader to have the right tools, the right skills, and be positioned so that they're always ahead of the team. Because if they're always ahead of the team are always going to keep improving. And like I said at the beginning, some of this has come out of pain. It's watching senior leaders who are the limit to their team. I thought, man, if only you had a different approach, maybe not today, but 10 years ago. If you'd been able to absorb some of these, because some of these lessons we've talked about here, if you're 20 years into your career, some of these changes are hard to make. If you're 2 years or 5 years or 7 years into your career and you're just starting your leadership journey, you can make these changes pretty quickly. So it's helping leaders never become the limit to their team.
Mate, I love the simplicity of that message. Fantastic. Mate, if just as a final word for our listeners, if you could give them one bit of advice, and really you've given so many bits of advice through this interview, but if there was one bit of advice you'd like to give to leaders today, what would that be?
The advice I'd give is one that I think I like to use personally in our own business and with our clients. I'm trying to think of the right words to describe it, but the advice is to be more open, and the word is vulnerable, but what I mean by that is if you know a conversation needs to happen with a client or a team member or a boss or a peer or a wife or a husband, don't put it off. It requires vulnerability and courage to face up to the things that we know are holding us back, but we're not doing anything about. It might be financial discipline, physical discipline. It might be someone in our team. But most of us have something holding us back. And if we spend even just a few minutes thinking about it, most of us can pinpoint what that is. The hard part is actually doing something about it. And most of it starts with a conversation with someone. So my parting advice would be try and write down the thing that you think is holding you back. In this context, as leader of a team, I find 9 times out of 10, it's going to point to a conversation you need to have with someone. Put that person's name in the blank space. Who is it I need to go and talk to? And my advice would be to have the vulnerability and courage to do that exercise. Go and have the conversation with the team member, the peer, the boss, the person you've been putting it off, needs to happen. Go and make it happen.
That's great advice, mate. So really the summary of that for me was being vulnerable is the starting point. So as a leader, be more vulnerable, and that will create the opportunity for conversation, and who knows what happens from there.
That's right. And everyone, all of us, including you, Brendan, and me, has a conversation we probably should have had a week or a month or a year ago that we haven't had. We need to have it. Doesn't require a lot of thinking to work out what it is and with whom. I find most good things are on the other side of the right conversation.
And again, it's a great point that you raise, because you're living and breathing this, I'm living and breathing this in my business, but we can still find this tough. We reflect back and think, did I really have the right conversation a week or 2 weeks or a month ago? So it's not easy, I get it, but probably that, again, going back to your model and being self-aware around that and who you are, then that can help. Mm-hmm. And being vulnerable to move forward with that really sets a solid foundation.
It's been great chatting, mate.
Mate, thank you very much. As a final point, now, if listeners wanted to ask you a question, you're a man with unbelievable experience. If our listeners wanted to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
3 ways. One is contact you. You can give my details. 2,
oh, that sounds like a buck pass.
No, 2, if you've got a pen and paper. My email is martin.west@xgap.com, xgap.com. Mm-hmm. And the third way would be the same details are on the website for the book, which is hardroadleadership.com. The book, we've set a website up just for the book called hardroadleadership.com. My contact details are there as well.
Excellent. So yes, hardroadleadership.com. Fantastic website. There's an online coaching course associated with the book as well. So look, and you can buy the book online through that website. So I'd thoroughly recommend. It's a fantastic read. Great nuggets. As you can hear from the interview today, Martin has some fantastic insight, and the work that him and Mark, his business partner, have done and putting this book together is fantastic. And the exciting thing is that from what I read through the book and the later part is that there's a book 2 and a book 3 that'll be coming out at some stage in the future. So I look forward to hearing that. Martin, thank you very much for your time, mate. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. It was a fantastic stroke of luck meeting you and having you in my life, and thanks very much for sharing today.
Appreciate the time, Brendan. Great knowing you too. Thanks for having me on, mate.
That concludes my 2-part interview with Martin. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. Once again, it was really tough to only pick 3 key takeaways from this second part of my conversation with Martin. But here they are. My first key takeaway: building strong relationships, particularly one-on-one relationships. Do you value one-on-one relationships? If you do, you will have the brain space and you'll make the time to do them. It's absolutely vital to take the time to get to know the people in your team as real people. If you aren't making the time for it, you need to consider this question that Martin mentions. What value are you placing on relationships in your team? My second key takeaway: coaching and helping people improve. Ultimately, your job as a leader is about other people in the team. It's not about you. This thinking requires a mindset shift in some leaders. As a leader, there should be nothing more satisfying than seeing other people in the team improve. Martin talks about a simple 3-box coaching model. Firstly, get clear on current performance, then decide on what the future performance looks like, and then agree the steps to take to improve from current to future. I really love the quote Martin mentioned. Coaching is the juice behind being a team leader. My third key takeaway is related to Martin's final piece of advice for leaders. And he said, be vulnerable and courageous. Talk about things that we know are holding us back and impacting on performance. Write down what you think is holding you back in the context of leading a team, and show the vulnerability and courage and do something about it. As Martin said, most good things are on the other side of the right conversation. So in summary, build strong one-on-one relationships. Get good at coaching and helping people improve. Be vulnerable and courageous, and have the conversations that you need to have. If you have any questions or feedback about this episode, please feel free to send me a message at brendan@brendanrogers.com.au. Thank you for listening. Stay safe. Until next time. Thank you for listening to the Culture of Things podcast with Brendan Rogers. Please visit brendanrogers.com.au to access the show notes. If you love the Culture of Things podcast, please subscribe, rate and give a review on Apple Podcasts. And remember, a healthy culture is your competitive advantage.